Hello, in this video I'll give you a solid introduction to booleans in Blender. So we've got our default cube here. Let's turn off the grid, just make things less visually cluttered. So let's go into overlays and turn off the X and Y. So let's do some editing on our default cube. Let's just select it, tab. We can go into the edge layer, pressing 2. We can press Alt X to activate X-ray mode. That's my hotkey for it. We can select, let's say, these edges and then Control B to activate bevel. So we can just change its width. We can press S to change the sides, make it smooth. Here we can press A again to change its width. We get something like this. Alright, now we can press 3, go into face level, select this face, and then I like to press W to switch to move tool and then just move this out. And then tab again, Alt X. Alright, so in order for us to use booleans, we can actually boolean this object itself. So we can just press Shift D to create a duplicate. We can right click to make sure it's at the same position. We can switch to scale and scale a little bit. And scale a little bit on the X-axis as well. Alright, and we've got this. So let's select the first object. We'll go into the modifiers, add modifier and boolean. And as you can see, we don't have a lot of options here. It's nice and simple. So we can select our object in two ways. We can click on this left box icon and actually choose it from here. And press the X to get rid of that. Or you can use the eyedropper tool and select your object of choice. Alright, so in order to see just our boolean object, we can press Alt Q to activate No Tools Isolate. There we are. We can also select this object and activate the wires for it so that it does not block the way of our boolean. So we can easily see what's happening here while still being able to see this object. So let's go into our object properties, viewport display, display as wire. Alright, so now we can see the result of our boolean while still being able to see which objects are involved in operation. However, it can be a hassle to always go into here, into our object properties. So we're going to actually set this to be a hotkey. So for example, I can right click on this, assign shortcut. Let's use maybe 0 for example. So when I press 0, nothing happens. So remember, in Blender, if something else is overriding your hotkey, you need to change that. So we'll go into Edit and then Preferences. Let's switch this from name to key binding. So you can search either by the name of the tool or what key is assigned to. And let's just enter in 0. And we're in object mode, so let's see. By default, as you can see, 0 is set to hide collection. Let's just turn that off. Alright, so if I press 0 now, you can see it works. And I can just quickly set that to be a wire. So I can be, for example, in any of these other panels. I can just press 0 and wire. There we are. Alright, so that is our first boolean. We can, for example, right click on this and make this shade smooth. Just we have the smooth boolean on the inside. So you want to make sure that your objects involved in boolean are smooth if you want it to have a smooth result. Alright, so let's add another boolean. Let's press Shift A, Mesh Cube. Alright, I'm just going to move this, let's say, up here. And actually, let's turn off this object. That's Cube 001. Let's just turn off the eye for that. Alright. In order for us to quickly get another boolean, we can of course go into Boolean and select it here. All we can do is simply click on Copy. Press X to get rid of the original one. And then let's select New Object. Alright, let me just quickly isolate this. As you can see, however, boolean is not working. If I turn on my wireframe, you can see something is happening here, but it's not differencing, it's not subtracting it. The reason for this is because boolean in Blender does not like it when you have the objects occupy the same exact face right here. So you can see that when I originally created this object, I went ahead and moved this in this direction, not in this direction. And because of that, when I created a new cube, it appeared exactly on the same position on the X-axis. So you can see what's happening. It's perfectly even here. And boolean does not like that. However, notice what happens if I move this object. First, I'll just scale it a little bit. Alright. Notice what happens. You can see boolean is still not happening. Notice what happens when I move this a little bit to the left. You can see now it works. Let me just Control Z. Let me press 0 and wire. As you can see, it's not working. When I move it a little bit to the right or left, it works. So you never want it to occupy the same exact space here. Booleans generally don't like that. You always want to move it a little bit. And there we go. Alright, at this point I can press tab and start to edit this object. You can see when I go into edit mode, it gives the slight shaded face effect, which makes it easy to model. So I can create this kind of scope effect. I can use Alt S, which I've got set to loop cut. So I can do this, maybe insert a loop here, and I can, for example, move this down. So you can see I'm getting this interesting scope effect. Control B, there we go. Control B, there we are. And you can hold Alt as you left click on the edge to loop it. Control B, and there we are. Tab to get out of edit mode, and here is our scope. We can just turn off the shade flat for now. In fact, let's A to select all our objects. Let's just have it be flat for now. Alright, and I can just hide this object as well. And I can always go back and edit this original object. Let's say, for example, I can select this, hold Control, left click, bevel, right click to make it 0, then I can move it down myself. I can scale this, and as I scale, I can simply enter in 0 to flatten it out. Alright, let's also activate mirror. And let's make it the y-axis, bisect, and flip. There we go. So by default, when we create objects, they are positioned where the 3D cursor is. Not the orange dot, that's your active object, but this little object around it. And you can see it's a funny little thing in the situation where the 3D cursor is actually helping you to create this kind of FPS reticle effect, this holographic reticle. But what you can do is hold Shift and right click to position the 3D cursor somewhere else. So now if I press Shift A and let's say create another cube, you can see how it's positioned at the location of the 3D cursor. So I can now edit this object. I like to edit things in edit mode, not in object mode. So I'm going to scale this. I will press Tab first. Alright, maybe something like this. And then 2 to go into edge level. In order to ring an edge, so if I'm going to select these edges, I can hold down Control and Alt, and that's going to ring it. Control B, and there we are. And now what I can do is just minimize the mirror, copy this boolean, X this one, and then select this one. Select this object, 0 and wire. And there we are. So you can either move this object or this object. So you can get some very interesting effects with this. For example, you can easily get different looking effects just by moving this object. So let's say, for example, that I will hide this as well. You look at this and you think, okay, how can I quickly modify this to create some variance? Well, all you have to do is just move this object, and then you've got this kind of effect. You can move it some more, and now you've got this. You can move it back, and now I've got this effect. So just by moving things around a little bit, you can get very different, interesting results. You can even add things like scale to the mix as well. If you scale it, we get this. If we scale in another direction, we'll get this. Maybe this has some value as well. We can even rotate it as well. So maybe we can rotate like this, and maybe get some interesting looking furniture or something. You can hold down Control as you rotate to limit it to 5 degrees. So now we've got this interesting result just by rotating it. So always take the time to do a little bit of moving, a little bit of rotation, a little bit of scaling, and just see what other quick shapes you can get. So this makes booleans very interesting for iterative design and just quick variation. I'll just press Ctrl Z several times. What we can also do is detach parts of this to use as a boolean operation as well. So for example, what I would do is just Shift D, right click to make sure it's in the original position, and I will just apply all of these booleans. I can apply the mirror as well. First I will just insert some loops. Alright, then I will press 3 to go into face level, and I will select this face, hold Control, select this one, Control I to select inverse, X, and delete the faces. So we're left with this. And so now what I can do is just press Tab, and I can apply Solidify to give this some thickness. I'm going to go a little bit inwards. Alright, and actually I will also want to delete this one as well. And now I'll apply the Solidify, making sure I'm not in edit mode, so I'll press Tab first, apply, Tab, and I can press 2, and I can select this, hold Shift, left click, Shift, left click, and then Shift, left click, and then Control B to bevel this. Alright, Alt Q, maybe I can move this a little bit. Alright, and now I can use it as a boolean for this object as well. So I can just copy this, I'll just X, and select this object as well. And now we have this little object being used as a boolean as well. So I can select it, Tab, A to select everything, Shift D, and now I have another object right here. And because it's part of the same object, because we duplicate in edit mode, we don't have to do any further additions. It's now part of this object as well. Alright, so let's say we want to boolean with one of these surfaces. So let's say, for example, I want to have an inset area here in the front. Well, if I press Tab, I'll of course be left with this. Now, one thing I can do is just apply all the booleans. Just apply them all and then just press Tab. And now I can select one of these faces, select linked flat faces to select all this right here. And now I can just inset like so, and then let's say bevel. But of course, that gets rid of the live boolean aspect. So I'll just press Ctrl Z to undo all that. What I can do instead is just Shift D to duplicate this, right click to make sure it's set to 0, so it's not moving at all. And I can apply on this duplicate object. Alright, I'll just press Alt Q, and now what I can do is Tab and do the same operation on this one. Control I, delete faces. May need to Alt Q to make sure I've isolated. A, inset, there we go. Control I and X to delete the faces. And now we're left with this. I can, for example, cut this. Alright. So let's say I want this. Alright. And I can apply Solidify. Alright. So this time what I can do is to copy this, but change this from difference to union X and select this object. Alt Q to isolate, and now you can see that I still maintain the live boolean aspect of this, but now I can have all of these duplicated shapes to add to the design. So we've looked at difference and we looked at union. Let's take a look at intersect. Let's take a look at how we can have some instance objects as well. So I would just press Shift A, and let's also create a cylinder. Let's press Shift and right click first to assign our 3D cursor right here. Shift A, mesh, and cylinder. And let's tab and just scale this right away. And scale it on the z-axis and just kind of move this up. Alright, so we want to cut out a hole here, but we also want to intersect as well. So what we can do is two things. I will just select this object and apply boolean, and then this is set to difference, and then I will select this object, and then I will select this object, press 0, and make this wire. So now we have the difference happening. But we also want intersect. So what I would do is just press Shift D and then right click to make sure it's the same position. And now I will just switch this one from difference to intersect. As you can see, we now have this mesh that is both subtracting and intersecting. To make this easier to see, let's change the color of this object. So go into our material properties. We'll scroll down here and we'll change this color. And actually, let's use a different one. So what I can do is just use a plus and then new. And what you can do is just drag this onto your object. There we go. So now we can clearly tell this is one object, which we can isolate, and this is the second one. What we can also do, to show a different example, I'll just use a different cube here. Alright, let's say we've got this, and then I will Shift A and create another one. And then I will position this one up here, and then like so. So what I can do in this situation is I can select this object and press Shift D and then right click. Then I can select this object and press Alt D and right click. And then I can select one of these objects and then hold Shift, select one of these objects, move it off to the side. So here's what's happened. When you use Shift D, that's just duplicate. When you use Alt D, that's duplicate instanced, which means that these two objects are now instanced, which means if I press Tab and start to modify one of them, you can see the other one is also being affected. I can press Tab, select this one instead, Tab. So these are now instanced, but these are not. So that means with this object, I can apply Boolean. Let's use difference, select this. And with this one, I can apply Boolean, choose intersect, and choose this one. So now you can see if I isolate these, we now have this one being differenced and this one being intersected. So now I will set these to be wire. Now notice a strange thing that happens here. If I start to model this, so let's say I select this, start moving around. Notice how we can see the difference happening in real time on this left object, but not the right object for some reason. It's not intersecting properly. Well, it will once you press Tab, and that will cause it to update. So don't panic. If you notice it's not working properly, that just means you need to press Tab. So for example, if I start to bevel this, you can see it's not working, Tab, and there we go. So that is another way we can do this. And so once you are happy with your Boolean, you can do further modeling operations. So I can just apply this, Tab, and now let me just isolate this first. I can begin to further model this. I can select this polygon, select linked flat faces, get this. I can start to inset this. What I would do is inset a little bit, and then switch to scale to scale it up more. And let's say I want to create some sort of hole for this button to make it easier to press. I can do so just by basic operations. So two things you can do after Boolean is you can either subdivide this by applying subdivision surface, or you can apply bevel on top. So I can apply bevel, maybe turn off clamp overlay, maybe increase the segments, and for limit method activate angle. And so I can also just decrease this, let's say 0.05, maybe 0.02. So I have 2 more videos on how you can solve both bevel issues as well as how you can have good subdivision after you apply Booleans. You can find a link to both of those videos in the last 20 seconds of this video. Thank you for watching and take care.